want to start off with the breaking news that happened a couple of days ago. So the New York AG, the New York Attorney General,
Yeah.
Letitia James, I believe her name is, she concluded after a month long or a couple month long investigation that that Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, sexually harassed 11 women while from, I believe it's 2013 all the way to last year or this year. And before I kind of like dive into the investigation itself, just want to give a brief overview of who Andrew Cuomo is. So Andrew Cuomo, right, comes from this really powerful family of politics and power. His father, Mario Cuomo, was governor back in the 80s, I believe, and he was governor for 11 years. So he was governor for 3 terms. And when he was governor, Andrew Cuomo was working for his father. He was like, a top aide at the time. And he's been in office, Andrew Cuomo, for the last 11 years. So he was actually gonna run for a 4th term. And before this happened, he was like planning on doing it. But so he's been in office for 11 years. Before that, he was the Attorney General of New York. And before that, he was the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under Bill Clinton. So point is, this guy is a career politician, right? Basically all he's known his whole life. And what's crazy is that during the pandemic, right, it kind of started off in New York, in the United States. At least you guys remember back in March when New York was going crazy. No one was going there anymore because of the explosion in COVID cases. But what happened back in March, it's crazy to me, is that because hospitals were over capacity, right, nobody was prepared for the pandemic. Nobody saw this coming. Andrew Cuomo actually allowed nursing homes. So nursing homes for people that are, older, or, just they're usually like in their 70s, 80s, or 90s, right? He basically allowed those nursing homes to accept COVID patients because hospitals were over capacity. And obviously, New York wasn't the only state that did this. A lot of other states did it. And in New York, especially, this led to an increase in COVID cases. And what Andrew Cuomo did was, because of the spike, he actually hid the data on the nursing home deaths. So what he did and his aides did was, when the state health department officials were releasing their report on what happened in COVID, they undercounted COVID cases by 50%. So approximately 15,000 people died in these nursing homes. But the story gets crazier. Back in 2018, when Andrew Cuomo was running for his 3rd term, right, he took $1 million in like the last stretch of the campaign from basically a healthcare lobby group that includes like a bunch of nursing homes in New York hospitals. The name of the organization, I'm trying to look for it. Anyways, when I find it, I'll let you guys know. But he basically took $1 million from this lobby group, right? And what they did was, last year when New York passed their state budget, they included this tiny little provision, right, which allowed these nursing homes and all these hospitals to not have any liability for any of the deaths that occurred in the nursing homes. So none of these high-end executives could be sued by any of the victims' families for related to any of the COVID stuff. So it was like this one sneaky little provision in hundreds of pages of the state budget. And turns out, the group that lobbied for it gave him $1 million back in 2018. And so not only are they not responsible for any of the deaths, but they obviously had this, conflict of interest with Andrew Cuomo. He was struggling in the last stretch of the campaign, and they gave him $1 million. And so what happens is he gets a bunch of backlash, right, from the media afterwards, like approximately a year after all this happened. And then finally, eventually, the New York State legislature eventually like repealed that provision. But my point is, like, he's had a history of doing these sneaky little things, right? And he basically, his goal is to get what he wants, right? And to like stay in office. And so he's gonna do what he wants to stay in power. But the story gets a little crazier though. So back in March of last year, he starts hosting these daily briefings, right? Talking about what the state is doing in response to COVID-19, and how the state's coping with the problem. And obviously, like, a lot of governors are doing it. I don't blame him for that. But what happens is, everybody starts loving his briefings. He's this charming guy, right? And he's, I guess, entertaining. And so he's providing a sense of comfort to all the people in New York who are struggling, and he's like giving them daily updates. But the media starts idolizing him, and everybody like starts talking about Andrew Cuomo, how handsome he is, how he's still single, and look at this amazing guy, protecting us from COVID-19. And what happens is this admiration turns into idolization, and nobody ever questions what he does. So during the pandemic, turns out Andrew Cuomo, because of his like newfound fame, he got a $5 million book deal, right? And he talked about, in October he publishes this book called Lessons in Leadership, Lessons Learned from COVID-19, and the pandemic has only been there for around like 7 months, and New York is still struggling. Like they're not completely out of it. I mean, Matt, you went to New York in December. They're still not out of it. But he wrote this book in $5 million book deal, and guess he is the highest paid governor in New York State history. So he already has a big salary. He's scheduled to make $250,000 this year, and he gets a $5 million book deal on top of that. And basically, he hides these nursing home debts. He retaliates against everyone who questions him for like hiding these nursing home debts. All of his top aides try to protect him, and turns out some of his top aides were actually, using their private time to help him write the book. So he wasn't the only one writing the book. All these guys were like, in his office helping him write his book in private. And the AG, the New York Attorney General, has launched an investigation into that, whether or not he was using state resources to write the book. So he's on the same time that media is idolizing him, he's writing his book, he's hiding nursing home debts, but also what he's doing is he's sexually harassing people who work for him. So there's a couple of reports out there of people who used to work in his office. There's one of a particular woman. She's about 25 years old, and she's a survivor of sexual assault. And Andrew Cuomo starts asking her all sorts of questions about her experience with sexual assault. And then he asks her, would you ever consider sleeping with me? Or not with me. He asks, are you into older men? And then he asks a bunch of other inappropriate questions. And that's just like one example of his creepiness, I guess. And then there's another example of a state trooper. So a person who's supposed to protect him, right? She's a female state trooper. And I guess he scouts her out somewhere, and he puts her on his personal security detail. And she didn't have the experience, but I guess he finds her attractive. He puts her on his security detail, and he basically inappropriately touches her throughout her tenure of protecting him. There's so many other allegations. I guess not allegations anymore. It's been confirmed or corroborated by other people. But my point is, while the media was idolizing him, he was doing all these things. And I just want to know what you guys think of.
Wait. Okay. So are all these reports that you said when he's hiding the deaths for COVID-19, are they just coming out now, or have they been out, but the media just didn't cover it?
So they've been out. So in the summer, this kind of the nursing home scandal started to blow up, but the media didn't really pick it up until the end of last year. After he started promoting his book. But so the media is starting to cover it now, but the mainstream media like CNN, MSNBC, they were not covering this nursing home scandal for a long period of time. Up until recently, they started covering it. And it's crazy how again, I don't know. I'm not saying that it was completely unethical and wrong of him, right, to let these nursing homes accept patients, because all the hospitals were filled up with patients. I understand that, but him hiding that fact for his own political gain so that he doesn't get any criticism, I mean, that's just corruption. There's no other way to put it. And he's bragging about how strong of a leader he was throughout this whole process, securing a $5 million book deal. I mean, how do you even have time to write a whole book while the state is being hit by one of the worst?
It's pride and greed. It's pride and greed.
I can't believe this. This is why I hate politics. This is just some of the reasons why I despise political leaders.
Yeah, but it makes sense that it all stockpiled this way, I think. I mean, there's a pandemic happening. Somebody's looking for a leader to talk them through. He has some sugar words to shoot out there. He says his things, people start loving him, and then your ego kind of inflates. And although it was only a 7-month period until he started writing that book, I mean, that's enough time to gain some traction, I think. Unfortunate, but it's reality.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because what I also left out something. What he did actually during the
Okay.
height of the pandemic in March, it gets even crazier, man, is that he actually allowed his family and friends to have special access to testing. So there's a report that,
Wow.
he rushed the tests of his family members. It's understandable that you have an affinity for your family members, but
Yeah.
these tests, they skipped ahead of everyone else who was struggling at the time. There's one report that Chris Cuomo, his brother, who is also an anchor at CNN, by the way, and
Okay.
like is having Andrew Cuomo on for these interviews. He's like bragging about like how proud he is of his brother for dealing throughout this whole pandemic. Chris Cuomo got coronavirus in March, but he was rushing his tests. And there's one report where a state trooper actually goes to Chris Cuomo's house in the Hamptons, and he drives back 6 hours, and people stay late in the lab beyond just like the working hours to make sure the tests are conducted appropriately. And he was giving his family and friends special access to testing in March and April.
Okay, Ibrahim,
And
sorry to cut you off. I have a lot of questions, but firstly, what is Chris saying right now? Has he made a statement on CNN?
it's it's so remarkable. So Chris Cuomo was having Andrew Cuomo on during the pandemic, right? Last year, he was having him on almost like every week, because the ratings were just going through the roof. They're like, oh my God, look at these brothers. They're so amazing. One is a primetime host of a CNN show, right? Chris Cuomo. And the other is a governor. Their father was a governor. This is an amazing family. And they're like joking around. Chris Cuomo is like showing off pictures of Andrew Cuomo when he was young. He's making fun of him. They're basically like having a good time, essentially. And in the backdrop, thousands of New Yorkers, right, are basically dying of the pandemic. And they're just like, I just don't understand like how they were having such a good time on TV. But your question was like, what Chris Cuomo is doing now. So Chris Cuomo, afterwards, when the sexual harassment allegations came out, he said that he's not going to cover his brother anymore because he can't cover it because it's his brother. And now he's not covering it at all. Like yesterday, he
Uh,
didn't even talk about it. And I
I
mean,
feel like
obviously,
okay.
he
I
should have
think it's
never
still
talked. He should have never interviewed his brother in the first place. You can't interview. That's a conflict of interest, right? I mean, your brother is not gonna ever criticize you in any sort of way, right? They're like, even if they question you, they're like, make something light of it. And so,
I think it's his duty as a journalist and as like a an influencer in like CNN. Everybody watches to cover this. In my opinion, I think he should cover it because he covered the good side of his brother. So you have to do both. I think.
exactly, I agree with you. Yeah, especially, I mean, it, it's just crazy, man. Like what, and Andrew Cuomo has like a very old history of being a bully, basically. He basically always gets his way, and like he's threatened people with like,
A lot of
if
politicians, to be fair.
no, but this guy's next level crazy. So like,
Oh, okay.
let me give you an example. So like Ron Kim, I think the guy's name is. He's a New York State Assemblyman, and he's a
Okay.
Democrat. And he started like talking about the nursing home deaths, and he called him up, and he said, "I'm gonna destroy your life if you don't stop talking about this." He like he has a history of like cursing the hell out of people and yelling at them, intimidating them with threats that he's going to ruin their careers. He's basically like the Donald Trump version of a Democrat, and he's not as extreme, but pretty much up there.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like he's corrupt. He's had his life easy. I mean, his father was governor of New York, right? And his brother is now the CNN anchor, right? I mean, like he's had a pretty easy life. He's now sexually harassed women just like Donald Trump has. So I think he's the Democrat version of Donald Trump. Honestly, it's
So
sad.
what I'm hearing is you're like the brown politician version of Andrew Cuomo.
No, man, come on, don't joke
I'm
about that,
just,
man.
I'm just joking.
No, absolutely not. I have no interest in that. It's it's just like I'm still in shock of all the things that he was doing while
Yeah, that's brutal. That's
everyone
brutal.
was basically worshiping him at that point.
Yeah.
And it's just I don't know. I mean, it and the thing is he's refusing to resign. Like so guys, I keep forgetting things because there's so much stuff with this guy. So after this 165-page report from the New
Yeah.
York AG comes out, he comes out with his own video, an 85-page response. And in the video, he shows pictures of him hugging people, touching them. And he's saying, look,
Wow.
I do this with everyone. I'm Italian. He uses his like Italian background in some sort of defense. Like all Italian people are this creepy, which is not the case at all. Italian friends, they're nothing like Andrew Cuomo. And the most disgraceful thing that Andrew Cuomo did was he actually showed pictures of Obama and Bush with like victims of hurricanes. he showed like pictures with him and saying, look, all politicians hug people. It's part of my job to hug people. But it gets even worse. He showed a picture of his father, Mario Cuomo, who was a very respectable man. I respect his father, right? He was a great governor, an honest man. And he shows pictures of him hugging people. And he says, my dad taught me to always show affection to people as some sort of a defense. So he's using his dad's legacy, right? Essentially, as a way to like create some sort of a defense for himself. It's like another example. You can never idolize a politician. Like you can't, like, no matter what the circumstances or how charming they might be or how entertaining they might be, you just can't trust him. He even got an Emmy. He got an Emmy award last year. The first politician.
Wait, what was he on a show?
Yeah, so usually it's for TV shows, but he got it because his TV briefings were so entertaining and remarkable, or something like along those lines, that they gave him an Emmy award for it, and he accepted it. He accepted it.
It's all bureaucracy. He didn't deserve it. It's just people liked him at the time, and Emmy and makes him this higher figure. It's ridiculous.
Once again, I don't trust this. This is why I don't trust any politicians except Bernie Sanders. So yeah,
I think the point is to never trust. I mean,
don't lie to the viewers.
What's up?
Don't lie to the viewers. I mean, you tell us stuff like off the podcast.
What?
Like, you know what I'm talking about, dude.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Don't pretend right now, man.
I love Bernie, bro. What are you talking about?
Well, I'm not talking about Bernie. I'm talking about, Anyways, Ibrahim, go ahead.
I was just saying, man, look, you can't ever idolize any politician ever. Like you can't even trust them. You always, because the thing is, they're elected positions, right? So like you have to treat them as like they're working for you. You're not like their employee. They're working for you. And the thing about with this guy is he's been in office for 3 terms now, and he's seeking a 4th term. Like, I don't understand why New York doesn't have any term limits. I just don't understand why they don't have term limits. I mean, he's eligible to be in office essentially for 16 years. That's almost 2 decades. Like, it's insane to me, like, why we don't have term limits. I actually think that because he's been in an office for such a long time, he thinks that he is like, immune from any sort of accountability. And because he's been in there for such a long time, I think that's a contributor to the fact that he's done what he's done, like all these different types of scandals that he's got himself involved in.